Thanks, Chris. Well, it's a little emotional just hearing him talk about that, that I'm going to be in the center of my story. So the labyrinth was chosen as a symbol on purpose. I was realizing I was kind of doing this like dance around this theme, and it was time to land in the center. And then I realized, well, the reason I was doing that little circuitous walk was because for 3 years, I've been in a labyrinth with twists and turns that I didn't expect, even as I knew I was headed somewhere important. So today, I'm in the center. For the first time publicly, I want to claim my story of spiritual abuse, which included emotional and psychological abuse, as a committed Zen student at a monastery in upstate New York. I want to give you a little sense of how I even landed in that particular labyrinth. This is where I was, and what led me here was actually motherhood, surprisingly enough. 25, and who's counting, more years ago, I had two babies, but I also divorced my husband. And I was a single parent at the most basic sense of that word. I was really their only parent. And anyone who knows me, and even in here, mothering is a major theme. It is the most powerful, amazing experience I've ever had being a mother. And it also is the most challenging. I was a single mom without outside supports, although I had privileges that were supporting me. But Ed May the other day talked about tapping out. I didn't have anyone to tap out with. I was exhausted. I had 2 kids, so one night one wouldn't sleep, but the next night then the other one wouldn't sleep, or one would get sick and I'd be up with them, and then the other one would catch it and I'd be up with them, and then I would catch it and I'd be up with me. I had no sleep. I was isolated. I was the caregiver, never receiving care. I remember at night before bed, I started a little ritual where I took Body Shop lotion. They don't even have Body Shop anymore, I don't think. It was a peppermint foot lotion. And I just took a minute before bed to rub my feet with this peppermint foot lotion as an act of self-care. It was sometimes all I could do. I didn't sit, I don't think, for 15 years. And I'm a reader, but my family became readers because I actually got to sit and read books. I loved reading books to my kids. I loved when they started reading. Reading, I think, was an opportunity to sit for me. So I found Buddhism through friends, and the truth of the Buddha is life has suffering, period. That there's a beginning to suffering, that there's an end to suffering, and that there's a path to end suffering. And at this time in my life, I heard the truth of that. As much as I loved mothering, I was in a lot of suffering a lot of the time. And so I went on my first retreat, arranged for the kids, taken care of, went on my first retreat, and I'm at just alone, I was in a center where everyone was quiet. And all you did was sit. It was amazing. And they fed you really good food, and I didn't have to do dishes and then get folks to bed. And I was at this meal, and all of a sudden, I woke up in the moment to the fact that I was in bliss, but my mind was all the stress, all the problems being caused. I saw how I caused my own suffering. I actually, in that moment, was great. And the problem was right here. So I was hooked. So I relied on the dHARMa. There's another feature other than the Four Noble Truths about suffering. There's a feature in Buddhist practice that's called the 3 jewels. The 3 jewels historically is the Buddha, his teachings, what he realized, and then the Sangha, the community that followed him back 2,500 years ago. It's also used now, the 3 jewels, to mean your teacher as a practitioner, the teachings used to apply to your life, and the community that you are held within that teacher. So it's made really manifest. And when I was on that first retreat, I found support in that structure that I wasn't by myself. even though I couldn't go to retreats all the time, even though we weren't on Zoom yet to practice, I felt and leaned into that structure of the 3 jewels. I wasn't alone. So I went, nope, not a flash, sorry. I went to upstate New York, and the 3 jewels were made manifest. My kids were grown 20 years later. Kids are grown. I'm an interfaith chaplain. I'd gone and gotten a master's degree. I was serving people in spiritual care, and it was the pandemic, and I thought, if I don't go now, what's keeping me? And so I went to upstate New York, and I committed to myself to practice deeply for 2 years. I was not becoming a monastic, so I could leave and visit family. I could leave and deploy for the Red Cross. But the rest of my time, I was committed to practice. And once a month, there was a 7-day deep retreat, which is the full-on silence. Everyone has to live on site who's participating. It is a rigorous structure of 18 hours a day, 12 of which are in ritualized practice, whether it's sitting, whether it's a walking meditation, whether it's an formalized eating practice as meditation, whether it's a work practice as meditation. It's really a heightened experience, 7 days. I was at this beautiful place. It was lovely. And for 8 months of that 2-year commitment I made to myself, it was like motherhood. It was discipline and rigor and not enough sleep, but it was what I hadn't had. It was community. It was direct relationship with a teacher. It was secluded, but it was a global community. It's affordable because the community of this 40-year-old center is so widespread, they now have an endowment. So it is one of the least expensive places to practice in the United States. So there were young people, there were old people. One of my good friends was from Norway. I met people from Holland and everywhere. It was really remarkable to be kind of isolated, but in the global community. 8 months. And then that labyrinth took a turn because, life keeps happening, right? It's just life, no matter where you are. And I witnessed and was implicated in a way I hadn't realized at the time with the sexual harassment of a young female in the community. There's a 40-year-old white man who was a long-term student and a 22-year-old white woman who was just there to practice for a month. She wasn't a committed student. People came in all the time for a month or a week or 2 weeks. She was there for a month. I witnessed sexual harassment, and I actually was kind of caught in the crossfires. So, you know what? I have a daughter. I was sickened by what I saw. I also have a son. And there was no way I didn't feel the best thing for him was to approach him and intercept it. So I did. He wanted to, he kind of wanted to be a victim about it. And I, closed the boundary and just said, the conversation's done between us. But I'm also in the 3 jewels. I'm also a Sangha member. And so it was important that I report it. Both of those people were in residency, and the teachers and the leadership are responsible for that container. So I reported it to the teacher who was pictured, who was also my spiritual teacher, was also this 40-year-old man's spiritual teacher. I reported it to him, and his answer was, I'll talk to him, right? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it was like, yeah, I know. This job is so hard, is basically what it felt like. He's a human. This was right on the cusp of deep retreat. So we enter into deep retreat. And I kind of want to see if you're game, if you're comfortable. Let me take you with me for a minute. So if you want to close your eyes or if you want to lower your gaze, I'm going to start with just reading what the monastery tells us about this opportunity for deep retreat. They say within this monastery cloister, everyday activities and concerns are simplified. You'll experience a place uniquely conducive to spiritual practice and to the connecting you to your own innate silence and stillness. they set the stage, and then day after day goes by with only the sound of bells marking a transition, with the sound of cloth robes rustling as someone passes, with the sound of bare feet on wooden floors. You're in zazen, you're sitting, and you smell food from the kitchen, and your body knows food is coming. And the 7th day of this retreat, probably my 7th or 8th since being there full time, we're in transition. It had been morning sitting practice. We're entering the cloister, the hallway, the commissary where food's going to be served. Everyone's in their gray robes, but the monastics are in black robes. And I had my gaze downturned as I was walking to take my robe off for a more informal meal. And there's a black robe in front of me and gray shapes moving around me, and suddenly this gray monolith is at my right shoulder. And there's yelling in my ear, and I am frozen. My nervous system blew off the charts. It was like being underwater. I couldn't make sense of what was happening. Everything was like, and I looked towards the black robe and I caught eyes with the monastic right in front of me. And that anchor helped me slowly recognize that this was that man who had harassed that I'd reported on. And as I recognized that, I realized the teacher talked to him. And as that came into my prefrontal cortex, awareness, I heard his words. Still flippin' crazy to me when I think of them. Don't you ever think of me again. Don't ever think of me. Don't say my name. Don't even think my name. I don't want you even looking at me. It was crazy. And I didn't know if I was crazy, if he really was not making sense. And I just held the gaze of this monastic. And after I don't know how much time, he was gone as fast as he'd arrived. And there was just this total emptiness. And 2 thoughts came up. What would he have done if I was alone? Why the fuck didn't that monastic do anything? I had a lot of recovery to do from that experience. Afterwards, I thought, who knows Pretty Woman, the movie, right? If you were watching movies in the 80s, Julia Roberts, she has that scene after the polo match, and she's like, in my own clothes. When someone like that guy Stucky walks up to me, I can handle it, I'm prepared. And I thought, I'm a woman in the world. This is not my first rodeo with male aggression. But I wasn't in my own clothes. I was in a robe in a retreat center who bases their structure around letting go of all those protective layers. Now, Julia and I, we are women of the world. So we know that Stuckies, man, they're a dime a dozen, right? There's always going to be a Stucky. There's no safe place. Richard Gere apologized, and they kind of went on happily their way. I didn't have that Richard Gere apology, but I had the 3 jewels, and I really thought that was going to be my sanctuary. So I'm here, right? I'm not in New York. So I don't know, maybe that tells you something about the sanctuary I did or didn't find. But I'm going to summarize quickly for you. The man didn't disagree with what happened. He didn't feel he needed to own anything or apologize for anything. And the monastery leadership, their handling of it, at best, they were bad parents. So this is basically what they did. You, Joey, hurt Max. His name isn't Joey. You hurt Max. She was doing exactly what I asked her to do, and you went over and you hurt her. Both of you to your room. I just got retaliated upon, and I have to go to my room. They proceeded to dictate when I could practice and he wouldn't be there, and when he could practice and I wouldn't be there. So, Joey and Max, I'll tell you when you can come out and play separately. And then, it didn't take long till it became, Max, don't come out and play because Joey actually needs it more than you do. Okay, bad parenting, right? But also kind of textbook misogyny. From the very beginning, sexual harassment of a young woman gets reported by a bystander who often is a woman. In this case was a woman. She gets retaliated on by the harasser, and then she actually gets harmed by this system of justice meant to deal with it. Now, it had very particular flavors, but I did stay for 5 months, and I want to tell you why I stayed. Because in the teachings of the Buddha, you fold everything into practice. And I'd committed to myself, I'm folding everything in and making it my practice. And I've thought a lot about power, what it is to give up power, what it is to own your power. And I wasn't giving up my power because I'm a woman who's lived with male aggression, and my typical response in power is to be like, bye-bye, no way, not staying here for this. And I knew that I could do that at the monastery. But I also knew I'm going to encounter misogyny in the world. It's just the way it is. And what could I actually learn that might give me more options? So I said to the teacher, not my teacher, but one of the leaders who's a teacher, was a woman, I said, well, I tell you what, instead of saying, this is fucked up, I'm going to say, is this fucked up? And I proceeded to live that question. Now, I can tell you a lot about what I discovered around what it feels like in my body to start recognizing being gaslit. So a quick example of what I came to call spiritual gaslighting was I was in the face-to-face teaching with my teacher, and you're supposed to bring everything in, right? And he's supposed to meet you right where you are. That's his wisdom of such advanced practice. And I went in with my distress at this, that I was still being told I can't practice when I had reported to him. And his talking to the student left me violated, and now I was living a consequence. So I was taking this exasperation, frustration, am I crazy? What is, and his answer to me was, everything passes. And you know what I learned, how my body responds to gaslighting, because I encountered this again and again, is I kind of get big and guffaw. I was like, I'm a 56-year-old woman. You think I don't understand impermanence? And now, mind you, this is a sacred setting, right? Robes and candles. And I was like, oh, this is how I know I'm being gaslit. This me comes out, which I'm familiar with, but I've never quite pinned down why and when it appears. Other examples like that, I could go on, but I really learned about my response. I also learned, Zen is patriarchal by intention. Huge benefit for me to see how I connect with the power of hierarchy. But then there was this layer of talking with authority, and suddenly there's a fog and a mist, and I'm thinking we're having a reasonable discussion, but it gets so confusing. It's like the Dementors. Who reads Harry Potter? Remember the Dementors? They are the symbol of despair. When the Dementors enter the Harry Potter books, they're foggy and misty, and they sap people of happiness. And I'm like, whoa, that is the feeling of patriarchal power that's not acknowledged, that's insidious, that tries to pull me into complicity. So, when I was in this 5 months of practice with myself, noticing how I respond, I created this piece of artwork. dHARMa, dHARMa. Going back in time, I realized, without realizing the degree then, that was my key to my question of, is this fucked up? Being curious. dHARMa, harm, is literally at the center of the teachings, the Dharma. And the experience I had staying in it and watching what happens in me and figuring out the patterns, and if I press harder, what am I risking around belonging? What am I afraid of losing, like being a good student? I got to cover all that territory in myself until finally one day, it wasn't really one day, but it kind of sounds good that way. One day, I realized it wasn't about what I was afraid of. I kept saying, what are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? And then I noticed I wasn't afraid of not belonging. I actually didn't want to belong. It actually felt like the healthiest thing in the world to not belong in that community. So I was in a labyrinth and I'm at the center. So the trick is I got to walk out of the labyrinth, right? So I got to go through all those twists and turns, but I know I'm on my way out. So one thing I've been carrying with me was this 22-year-old woman, every 22-year-old woman, this 40-year-old man, every 40-year-old man. And the way this harm of not addressing the reality of what's happening in this communities hurts everybody. The male, the female, the trans, the black, the everybody. So the dHARMa of my soul on retreat was really about the 3 jewels. Dharma is one of the 3 jewels. The teacher, totally messed up. Totally inappropriate. The community, they totally missed what it is to care for one another, what it was to care for me and the woman and the man. But it's the teachings, it's the dHARMa that empowers the other 2. And even in this talk, as I really try to think about the territory of dHARMa, I feel those mists. It's like, oh, my body, I had so much difficulty getting to this quality of dHARMa for this speech. It gets foggy, it gets misty, I get a little bit confused, and I thought, yeah, that's telling me in my body's signal, as I've learned it, that it's the teachings that actually are the source of the harm. So, ba-bam, the unveiling today is mitigating dHARMa, spotlighting harm, centering care. Because in Harry Potter, he finds his protective charm, the Patronus charm, is what J.K. Rowling called it. Patronus, right? Father. That was his protective charm. Well, my protective charm is the Matronus charm, the mother. Because mothering is a verb. It's not an identity, it's an action. And the kind of care where you're like wiping the poop off of butts and you're placing the oxygen mask on the other first, that's the kind of care that fends off this harm. So for the sake of my own healing, for the sake of the healing of people I'm starting to find myself in the spaces of, who've been sexually abused by Buddhist teachers, Shambhala, right down the street, this is a site where we all can come together and collaboratively care for one another. And also caution wisdom for those entering these spaces with care. Folks, thank you for your kind, patient attention.